This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Axis. There are questions that keep some gamers up at night. We're not sure whether this includes, when will I finally get a 4-player Caravan shooter that I can play anywhere I might be? But we might have an answer to that incredibly specific thing.
Originally known as Kyogeki Quartet Fighter, Quad Fighter K is a 4-player Caravan shooter developed by Japanese indie Happy Meal. It was published by Axis on May 31st, 2018. We love us a good Caravan shooter here on Bullet Heaven, and this one looks like it delivers, but as always, there's a bit of a twist. Let's take a closer look.
As a strictly cooperative game, Quad Fighter K is definitely an interesting take on the typical Caravan shooter formula we've gone over many times before on Bullet Heaven. However, Quad Fighter K is also a single-player game by technicality, offering flexible single-player gameplay that can make for a pretty compelling time.
On the outset of the game, no matter which mode is chosen, all players select their chosen ship from an expandable roster which sees new friendly and even enemy units added through various conditions. Each ship has different fire and speed, which can make for an interesting, and sometimes challenging, gameplay session, depending on what ship is chosen. Computer-controlled ships can also be selected by players, even if only one player is playing Quad Fighter K.
If you've ever played a Caravan shmup before, you know what to expect from Quad Fighter K's core controls. 8-way directionals will move the player's ship about the screen, and the A button on a Switch-compatible controller will fire the player's main shot.
Here's where things get really interesting. Players can combine with other ships much like the Xbox Live Arcade game Aegiswing. The main ship to a formation is known as the core, while all others are known as limbs. Limb players have control over fire, and the core controls both the fire and movement. By approaching and making contact with another player ship or CPU ship on the front, rear, or sides of the player craft, players can create various formations to enhance their firepower or protect other ships. Other attributes like speed can also be enhanced in a formation, especially when it comes to attack-style ships. Adding another attacker to the front can make for a very powerful formation.
Any player can hook up with and assume control over any other. A stronger player, for example, could dock with a weaker player to give them an added layer of defense, while the limb player controls bombers and extra fire. Single players can dock with any and all computer players in exactly the same way as well, allowing for one player to assume control over a cluster of 4 ships, since CPU players are pretty much helpless otherwise.
If a player needs to recoalesce, the formation can be broken by pressing the X button. This will fling all of the ships attached to the players, but can result in friendly destruction if care isn't taken. More importantly though, CPU players often just end up getting killed on their own, so a solid formation can make for much better chances at getting further into the game.
Throughout Quad Fighter K, players will discover pickups that grant players the ability to deploy a specialized local bomber attack. These bombers are collected by whatever player or CPU ship touches them, regardless of whether or not they are in formation. This can make it harder for player ships to snag a bomb when surrounded by other players or CPUs. These bomber orbs can be stockpiled, which creates a tail that trails their source ship. This tail can even block all kinds of enemy bullet types, adding a great layer of defense to the player's ship if long enough and properly used.
These bombs can be deployed one at a time with the B button. Every bomber can have a different icon that denotes the bomber's pattern, which is visible at a glance. Some are further reaching than others, so players will need to carefully strategize based on their patterns when deploying them against enemies and emplacements. Thankfully, players can cycle through these bombers using the L and R buttons.
While CPU ships do not deploy bombs when docked, and players have no way to deploy a CPU's bomb, an undocked CPU ship can sometimes be useful if they decide to use their bombers in critical situations. This is kind of rare though, and typically shouldn't be depended upon. If a ship with a bomb stock is destroyed, all of its bombs become up for grabs, and this usually means all other surrounding ships will get these bombers, making it pretty frustrating when a player's trail of 25 of them are snatched up by a ship that won't friggin' use them.
Quad Fighter K is played in one of 2 modes. Kyogeki mode has players defend VIP ships from destruction with unlimited lives. Only VIP ships have a finite life stock, and if any VIPs regardless of remaining ones lose all of their lives, it's game over. Attack mode is largely the same but has all players take on the game with their own life stock. If a player loses all of their lives, they can be brought back into the game if any other player earns an extend, but if all lives are spent, it's game over.
Each mode of play features 7-lettered stages which flow in a seemingly scrambled order, just like a number of obscure retro shooters. Normal and hard difficulties are available for players to test themselves in any mode. In addition, Kyogeki in Arcade also features a battle mode, which is a single-stage score attack. Players can not only select any stage that's been unlocked through normal play, but also opt to have a random stage selected for them. When the selected stage ends, whether through victory or failure, so does the game.
Quad Fighter K is pretty straightforward, taking these mechanics into consideration, but it also features a bonus shooting game called Cybership Naku. Naku is an homage to early, poorly programmed shooters from the Famicom era, complete with extremely basic sound, loose, shoddy control, and haphazard, super-fast enemy formations. It's basically designed to be as hard as possible. It also features alternating 2-player support.
The idea behind Cybership Naku is to collect 26 overparts, lettered A to Z, from cyber pyramids in each stage in order to take out the central computer Maria. There are over 100 stages in the game, and players will definitely have a rough time effectively getting through. However, players can gain access to a decent amount of weaponry to get the job done. 3-way, 5-way, side attack, Vulcan, laser, and barriers are all obtainable. Additionally, players can warp to other stages with special warp pickups. These warps can either be selected or randomized, throwing players to far-off stages in very little time, or to previous ones to get those overparts.
We'd say that this game is horrible and isn't really worth playing, but since this is actually by design, well, we guess it's something to experience? At the very least, if players get fed up with the inherent difficulty here, a number of cheat codes are listed in the game's included manual in the menu. And here's the kicker, the cheat code activated red laser ship actually features decent control. It could even be described as sharp. At any rate, this hidden manual is a pretty nice touch. We only wish a manual like this was included for the main game.
Quad Fighter K is as Caravan as games like this come, with an emphasis on destroying as many enemies and static elements as possible. This will obviously lead to a pretty sizable score, and while each player does collect their own points, they also all contribute to a single pooled total overall score. There are a few different ways to boost a player's tally though.
Enemy waves that are taken out completely award the player with 5,000 points. Any enemy wave that the player encounters can award a player in this manner, so naturally, a good amount of pointage can be obtained this way. Scoring in this manner will be displayed in a color corresponding to the player that took out the final enemy of the wave. This means that players can steal points in this manner if they decide to be sneaky.
Extra panels with a small pixel art character portrait of a girl named Akemi-chan can also be discovered if certain panels are continuously shot. The Akemi-chan bonus can vary between 1,000 and 20,000 points, which can add a significant amount of pointage to the player's score. Especially since there are many of these panels in each stage, this can add up quite a bit with a little luck. However, the points awarded for uncovering these panels is randomized. Once again, the points awarded correspond to the player that uncovers the panel by color. In all cases, there is an indicator for the player that nabbed the applied bonus under their section of the game's HUD in the sidebars.
The end of each stage also grants a sizable bonus for every bomber pod the player has in their stock, which can seriously boost the overall score. This is very handy in getting those all-important extends in arcade mode. Stage End also implements a light competitive aspect to the game as well. Each player will be ranked by their overall score, with the leading player being crowned the ace. Since all scores are combined into one single score for ranking anyway, this player ranking system is more for light smack talk or bragging rights than anything else.
Unfortunately, there is no online support for Quad Fighter K's scoring, and even then, local ranking does not exist either. Only the top combined score of each mode and difficulty is shown in the top right-hand corner of the screen, with no actual score table to speak of. It's simple, but then again, so were any number of classic Caravan shooters from the 80s, so at least when it comes to the game's overall theme, it's period appropriate.
Cybership Naku is even more basic than Quad Fighter K, once again with a title screen access, single high score shown when the game is started. Players simply get their scores from enemy destruction and the odd Akemi-chan panel.
When it comes to Quad Fighter K's presentation, there was obviously a very heavy emphasis on making the game as retro-feeling as possible. From the sounds to the visuals and even the controls and performance, Quad Fighter K is almost as retro as it comes. Outside of a few elements here or there, of course.
Outside of the main splash screen, all of the visual elements to Quad Fighter K are almost perfectly suited for an 8-bit game on the Famicom or NES. The color palette and resolution looks good and allows players to clearly tell what is an enemy, what shots belong to friends or foe, and bonus scores obtained from various players. What isn't especially clear is what background elements are collidable and which aren't. Some elements look as if they can kill the player and don't, while some look like they won't and will. It doesn't take long to figure these elements out though, so it's not awful, but it's an issue nonetheless.
Once again, playing in handheld or tabletop mode looks fine and all, but going to a big screen through the Switch dock? That's where all kinds of graphical tears start to rear their ugly heads. It's pretty distracting and fairly confusing too. If the resolution is being scaled properly like it should be, there's no reason for the visuals to look any different than when the game is running in handheld mode. But these tears don't seem to happen in Cybership Naku.
Where there are some issues with Quad Fighter K's visuals, the sound is pretty great on the whole. With a number of amazing standout tracks featuring all kinds of nods to classic games like Hector 87 and Star Soldier, Quad Fighter K really nails the 8-bit feel that it goes for. And it's no small wonder. Hector 87 and Star Soldier's Takeaki Kunimoto composed for Quad Fighter K alongside Akiko Mori, Tsuyoshi Ogasawara, and programmer Nakast. The title theme and credits even have fully produced tracks complete with cheesy vocals.
There's a bit of a catch to the music though. The loop points are very noticeable in several of these tracks. Meanwhile, the sound effects are very serviceable, though the sound used for lasers is a bit on the shrill side. It still completely lends to the believability that this was a game made in the early to mid 80s. All of these points also apply especially to Cybership Naku as well, though again, it's all kinda bad and wonky by design. Against all odds, the music in Naku is still kind of catchy despite this.
Beyond the bonus Cybership Naku game, there's not a whole lot extra to Quad Fighter K. The UI is serviceable and easy to read, which is good. It gets insanely cluttered with the control and mode guides in the sidebars though, so we just turn it off. The manual for Cybership Naku is also amazing with its own awesome track and the kind of layout you'd expect from an actual Famicom game. It even has black and white screenshots.
So, how does Quad Fighter K stack up? Let's take a look. Quad Fighter K's control is serviceable but also pretty iffy, especially with the doofus CPU characters bungling things up for human players.
Cybership Naku's control is straight up terrible though, but mostly by design.
There's a good amount of challenge here that somehow mounts with more human players. A good formation with certain ships can make for an easier time.
Cybership Naku is spiteful in its challenge, relying more on awful controls and unfair enemy speed to increase its overall challenge.
With 7 core stages, 2 difficulties, and 4-player co-op, there's a ton of gameplay in Quad Fighter K. The game lacks some appeal without extra human players, though.
Cybership Naku's inclusion gives players even more classic shooting kicks, even if its mechanics are frustratingly bad.
Quad Fighter K looks fantastic in handheld in tabletop mode, but 4-player games are cramped. On a TV through the Switch dock, though, the visuals tear all over the place, which looks awful. The sound is the strongest part of Quad Fighter K, with a huge number of standout tracks that make for a retro-tastic time, complete with nods to Star Soldier, Hector 87, and more.
Cybership Naku has some good sound too, but like the rest of this bonus kusoge, it's a bit wonky too.
With several mechanics borrowed from games like Aegis Wing, Star Soldier, and more, Quad Fighter K is a great culmination of ideas that kind of works.
But its technical issues means that the best-looking 4-player games are confined to a less than 4-inch display area, unless persistent graphical tears are something that you can ignore.
Quad Fighter K is only about $8, so despite its issues, it provides a decent amount of value, especially for 4-player fun.
The bonus game adds even more value to this package as well, bad though it may be.
So, is Quad Fighter K any fun? Well, the amount that some people will get out of Quad Fighter K might vary, especially if single player with 3 CPU ships is all that players have access to. But as a party game with 4 players in the hot seat, this Caravan style shooter works well. Still, its issues are plenty, and as such, Quad Fighter K gets a 3.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of Quad Fighter K on the Nintendo Wii Shop for about $8 US. You didn't like this game very much, did you?
Nope.
You never really told me why. Maybe if we can get our crew together, we can play it the way it was meant to be played.
Maybe. Hopefully. Maybe this weekend.